You're watching Sky News Breakfast. Now, here are the latest developments in the Israel-Gaza conflict for you right now. So, Israel's Prime Minister vowed to take mighty vengeance on Hamas after an unprecedented attack. It killed at least 250 Israelis and injured 1,500 more. It's the deadliest day in Israel in 50 years. Israel is striking back with continued airstrikes on Gaza, killing at least 230 Gazans. Israel is cutting off Gaza's supply of electricity, fuel and goods. Well, in a moment, we'll be going through the papers in the first look at the front pages, dominated, of course, by the Israel-Gaza conflict. But first, let's take a look at the front pages then, and the Observer headline, hundreds die and hostages held as Hamas assault shocks Israel. The Telegraph writes that stunned Israel has suffered a 9/11 moment there. Let's take a look at the Sunday Express. Well, it splashes Hamas shield horror, reporting on the civilians who are among those taken hostage. Sunday Times says hostages were dragged from their homes in Israel as others fled. While the Mail focuses on one kidnapped young woman with the headline, "Don't kill me." Well, with us this morning to review the papers are author and journalist Nikki Hodgson and journalist and author Janelle Aldridge. Thank you so much for joining us today. There is so much to get through, and of course dominated by the assaults in Israel. We'll start with the Observer because it takes on, we've had fighting in Israel for many years, the sparks are flying, but this is quite a game changer. The Observer focusing on the hostages held as this assault really kind of shocks not only Israel, but the world, Nikki.
Yeah. I mean, lots of people are referring to it as the greatest escalation of the conflict between Israel and Palestine in a generation. We saw in February that there was trouble in Jerusalem, if we remember. There was some terrorist activity, there was some fighting then, and people were beginning to get very nervous about what was going to happen. The kind of context for this is the fact that actually in Israel right now, lots of people are not very happy with Netanyahu, and they've been protesting because they're concerned about changes he wants to make to the judiciary and the effect that might have on democracy. But what has been interesting about what's happened overnight is both Netanyahu and his opponents have come together to form this unity government to kind of fight back at this attack. I think just, there are numbers reported in the papers of how many people have already been killed and who's been injured, but obviously they're going up by the minute, unfortunately, so they're not necessarily accurate. And I think what is also very, very concerning is the number of Israeli hostages that have been taken, and the fact that Israel will potentially be sending rockets or shelling in areas where their own hostages remain. It's going to be a very worrisome 24 hours for people.
A worrying time, a very dangerous moment too, and like never before, hostages, Janelle, being taken, which is what the Daily Mail are focusing on, this one young woman being dragged from the streets.
Yeah, and I think it's the reminder that in this long, complex and bloody history, and there are people at the centre of this, really human stories of people who are not caught up in the fighting per se, but caught up in it because they have now been taken hostage. This story of a 25-year-old woman who was at a peace festival, and this picture, very emotive, the moment that she's driven away on the back of a motorcycle with her arms outstretched. They say to her boyfriend, saying, "Don't kill me." And I think in all of the noise of what we're going to hear about, for me, it's that there are women, children and men innocently going about their daily life, and their lives will now never be the same, and the worry about what will happen to the hostages when they're taken captive. So I think this, like you say, it's a game changer because this adds a different element, a very real and violent element to what's happening.
And a big worry for so many people will be the fact that any peace negotiations are completely off the table now.
Yeah, obviously, because of, in the 90s, Rabin was murdered, the Prime Minister of Israel, when they were trying to put forward the Oslo Protocol, which was about the two-state solution. I just think, internationally, people have been calling for a tempering down of the tensions over the past few months. It's just very, very depressing this morning seeing this story, and just so upsetting for the thousands of people who live in the area.
And the other big question is, while eyes were focused on the West Bank, maybe the steam was off the wheel at Gaza, and that's going to be a big question for many people to answer to. And I'm sure Israel and Gaza will be a big theme, won't it, at the Labour Party conference that kicks off today, with Sir Keir Starmer announcing big changes for the NHS and technical colleges too. But are you feeling refreshed after a week of the Tory party conference in Manchester?
I mean, I can't say I am, for lots of different reasons. I feel very tired. The fact they come back to back as a journalist is actually very difficult.
It's also interesting, isn't it? Because usually it's Labour that host first, but this time Labour will have that advantage, perhaps, or maybe not, to be able to really react to policies that the Tory
Absolutely. I mean, something that I don't feel was covered in lots of, definitely not in Starmer's speech, was actually what's going to happen to the NHS. And Keir Starmer has gone large with this. So he's saying that he's going to raise £1.5 billion from getting rid of non-dom status in the UK, and he's going to use that to fund overtime NHS doctors and nurses to get through scans and appointments at the weekend. The major problem with that policy is that we don't have enough doctors and nurses. We don't have enough NHS staff. We have like more than 100,000 vacancies in the NHS right now. You know, where are these people going to come from? And also, if you're expecting staff to work during the week, are they going to really want to do well-paid overtime? They're exhausted. They do need downtime to recuperate and be able to give the right patient care. And of course, what they will say is that the big problem isn't actually just, us being paid. It's the money for the equipment. It's the money for the running. And we can't give the level of care that we would like to right now. So I don't really see how this is going to be the solution to the problem.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to hear a bit more from Labour on this, because if they do get into power, it doesn't mean that those nurses striking, those consultants and junior doctors will suddenly come back and stop striking, Janelle.
I mean, as I've long said, this whole strike conversation was actually a moment for a lot of strategic long-term thinking and planning. And when the strikes were happening, I think if Labour, personally, if I was advising them, if they were smarter, they would be talking about what is the long-term strategy to recruit more doctors and nurses.
And there you have
viable.
It.
You have to have good pay for the hard work that you do. And I think because that is not sorted, as a person coming into the industry, what's the will for you to want to go into a job that you already know is not well paid, you will not be well rested, you will be overworked, you could be the most caring person in the world, not many people are going to sign up for that.
I thought the other interesting thing from Sir Keir Starmer was talking about working on equality within the NHS, and talking about and highlighting how black women are more likely to die in childbirth, and really focusing on that equality. So it'd be good to hear more on that in the coming week. But we will move on, because Rishi Sunak has a problem with sick notes. Janelle.
So he wants to end sick note culture. So apparently what they're saying is that in 9 out of 10 cases, if you go to your GP and say, I need to be signed off work, they say, okay, and they sign you off. And so they're saying that actually they think GPs are far too lenient, and they want people, if they're sick, apparently, to go to work. But the thing what I think in all of this that they're forgetting is that often GPs are the front line of defence with a person, and the best placed person to understand someone's healthcare, their history, and whether or not the symptoms they're feeling, if they're ill because of work, are correct. The thing that I do think is interesting, what they're saying, which I do actually agree with, is that sometimes there are workarounds. And actually, if someone could be adjusted their hours, or if that was actually the antidote, you don't have to be necessarily signed off sick.
No.
It could be something like, you need to work less hours, this person needs flexible working. Any system is open to people abusing it. That is the reality. However, most people are only going to go to their GP if they genuinely feel they cannot cope at work because they're unwell. And I think we have to trust people that they're not just getting signed off for no good reason, that there is something at the bottom of it.
Yeah, this
looks at bad intent, I think, as the first course of action, which I don't think is right.
Yeah, so this is all coming from page 4 of the Telegraph. There will be doctors that will be, as we said, like nurses, like teachers, overworked, underpaid, and their first reaction will be, well, look, here's a sick note, I can move on to the next patient.
Well, I mean, I suppose there must be, but I mean, I don't think that is kind of by and large the sick note culture that, Rishi Sunak is taking issue with. I think what's really important to say is that the disruption to working life during the pandemic has really affected people's priorities. And I think that's healthy, actually. I think the fact people are saying, actually, I'm not prepared to work 60 hours a week anymore. I'm not prepared to not see my children until, Sunday night is positive. And that actually what we're seeing is a reaction to people wanting a healthier work-life balance, as much as people just saying, I don't want to go to work today.
Indeed. Ladies, thank you so much. We'll leave it there and we'll catch up with you in the next hour. Thank you very much.